Welcome to Beyond the Struggles, the place where we dive deep into the untold battles, hidden sacrifices, and powerful journeys behind the world's greatest minds. Here, we uncover the stories that history forgot, the pain, the losses, the determination, and the victories that changed humanity. Today, we begin the remarkable story of a man whose genius was born not in noise, but in silence.
This is the beginning of Alexander Graham Bell's journey. Every great invention has a birthplace.
For Alexander Graham Bell, that birthplace was not a laboratory filled with wires, nor a grand hall of scholars. It was a modest home in Edinburgh, Scotland, a home shaped by quiet resilience, soft gestures, and a mother's silent world. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3rd, 1847, into a city known as the Athens of the North, a hub of intellect, philosophy, and scientific curiosity. Yet the most profound lessons he would ever learn came not from books or professors, but from his own household. His mother, Eliza Grace Simons Bell, was deaf. From his earliest memories, he watched her navigate life without the ability to hear her own child's voice. She communicated through lip reading, through touch, and through emotion. She found rhythm in the vibrations of the piano and connection in the movement of lips she could not hear. Her silence wasn't a limitation to young Alexander. It was an awakening. It made him study the human voice, the mechanics of speech, and the mystery of sound, long before he could understand their scientific significance. He would sit beside his mother, watching how she felt music, with her fingertips pressed against the piano's wooden frame, how she sensed footsteps before seeing a person enter the room, and how she captured meaning without needing to hear words. Bell's father, Alexander Melville Bell, was a teacher of elocution and an expert in speech training. He developed techniques and visual speech symbols to help the deaf communicate. Their home was filled with discussions about phonetics, articulation, and the human voice. While most children grew up with toys and games, Alexander grew up surrounded by diagrams of vocal cords, tone symbols, and demonstrations of speech techniques. His father's work wasn't just an occupation, it was a calling, and Alexander absorbed it like oxygen. This unique environment made Bell highly curious about the invisible forces around him. Why did sound travel? How could the human voice be shaped? Why could some people hear and others could not? These questions began as simple wonders in a child's mind, but they would grow into the mission that defined his entire future. But even as inspiration surrounded him, life was not without hardship. The contrast between the loud world outside and the quiet world inside their home planted a sense of responsibility deep within him. Watching his mother struggle yet remain graceful shaped his empathy. Watching his father fight to give the deaf a voice shaped his purpose. And watching how sound mattered so much to the world, yet meant so little in his own home, shaped his destiny. In a way, Bell's childhood was a paradox. Born in a city full of ideas, raised in a home full of silence, guided by a father obsessed with speech, and inspired by a mother who could not hear it. These early contradictions didn't confuse him, they crafted him. Before he ever touched a wire, before he ever considered electricity, before the world ever heard a voice through a telephone, Alexander Graham Bell was a boy trying to understand why his mother could not hear him, and how he could bring sound back into her world. And that is where his journey truly begins. In Chapter 1, we saw how a childhood shaped by silence awakened Alexander Graham Bell's fascination with sound. But every great journey moves through darkness before reaching discovery. Bell's next chapter began with loss, deep, painful, life-changing loss, that pushed him across oceans and ignited a fire inside him that would one day transform the world. The Bell family's life in Edinburgh was warm, intellectual, and full of promise. But beneath the surface, a silent enemy was growing. Tuberculosis, the cruel disease that haunted the 19th century, struck the Bell household. One by one, Alexander's two brothers, Melly and Ted, fell ill. They were young, talented, full of potential, and within a short time, both were gone. The deaths devastated Alexander. His home, once filled with experimentation and laughter, turned into a place of mourning and fear. The disease had taken nearly everything from them, and Bell's parents feared it would soon claim him too. Grief, exhaustion, and desperation left the family with only one choice: escape. In 1870 they left Scotland behind, boarding a ship to the rugged shores of Canada. Their destination was Nova Scotia, quiet, vast, cold, and far removed from the bustling streets of Edinburgh. It was not a glamorous move, it was survival. For Alexander, the migration was more than a change of geography. It was a break in identity. Back in Scotland, he had dreams, studies, friends, and a world rich with scientific opportunity. In Canada, he found himself surrounded by wilderness, open fields, endless forests, fierce winds. Silence returned to his life, but this time it was not his mother's silence. It was nature's silence. Many would have fallen into despair. But Bell was not built to collapse. The isolation gave him room to think without interruption. The grief gave him purpose, and the slow rhythm of rural life gave him time he had never enjoyed in Edinburgh's busy streets. In this quiet Canadian landscape, his experiments resumed, but they were no longer childish curiosities. He now pursued sound with a seriousness shaped by death, loss, and the need to understand what connected human beings. He began studying the human voice more deeply than ever before, dissecting the anatomy of speech, creating mechanical devices that imitated vocal vibrations, and sketching crude diagrams of machinery that might one day reproduce sound itself. Every evening he retreated into nature, listening to how sound traveled across fields differently from the stone architecture of Edinburgh. He observed how wind carried voices over lakes, how echoes behaved near cliffs, and how vibration seemed to have a life of its own. Nova Scotia gave him something Edinburgh never could: clarity. It was here that he formed the idea that would guide him for the rest of his life. The belief that sound could be captured, controlled, transformed, and maybe even transmitted through something other than air. At night, he filled notebooks with theories about waves, resonance, and frequency. He didn't yet know how to build what he imagined, but the vision was there, a whisper of a future invention that didn't exist anywhere else on Earth. But destiny wasn't finished shifting his path. Even across the ocean, Bell's father believed his son had a larger mission. He sent Alexander to Boston in 1871 to teach his now refined methods for educating the deaf. Bell didn't realize it yet, but this journey to America would be the final step toward the breakthrough the world had been waiting for. What began as escape from tragedy was becoming transformation. The death of his brothers pushed him across continents. The silence of Nova Scotia shaped his imagination, and the opportunity in America would soon give him the stage he needed. Bell was no longer a boy fascinated by sound. He was becoming a man preparing to change it. Alexander Graham Bell had escaped tragedy, survived migration, and honed his understanding of sound in the quiet wilderness of Nova Scotia. But the world he was about to enter in America would challenge him in ways far greater than nature or grief ever could. In Boston, Bell's journey toward invention would collide with skepticism, poverty, and relentless competition. And yet he would never give up. In 1871, Alexander arrived in Boston, a city alive with innovation, commerce, and opportunity. He was only 24, but already a man with a vision. His purpose was clear: to teach the deaf to speak, to help them find a voice, and to continue the work that had begun in his father's home. Bell's methods were revolutionary. He used precise techniques to train students to hear through their eyes and feel speech through their fingers. His classrooms became laboratories of hope, filled with children who, like his mother, lived in silence but were learning to speak. By day, Bell was a teacher. By night, he became an inventor. He returned to his small workshop, a cramped room overflowing with wires, magnets, metal plates, and wooden contraptions. Here, away from the eyes of others, Bell pursued a dream that most people considered impossible, a machine that could carry the human voice. Not just the clicks and dashes of the telegraph, but speech itself. Real, living words traveling across wires. The challenge was immense. Every prototype failed. Every experiment ended in disappointment. Investors rejected him, claiming his ideas were absurd. Fellow scientists dismissed him, insisting that electricity could never carry the nuances of speech. Even some of his students laughed at his strange machines, which hummed, buzzed, and occasionally sparked. Yet Bell's belief never wavered. He had heard the silent struggle of his mother, the determination of his students, and the whispers of sound in nature. He knew that if he could master sound, he could bridge the gap between people separated by distance. Bell was not alone, but he was constantly racing. Other inventors were also pursuing ways to transmit sound electrically, filing patents and experimenting with telegraph technology. The race was as much about timing and business as it was about science. Bell needed money to continue his work, yet investors feared the unknown. Every day brought frustration and doubt, yet he persevered. Failure was part of the process. Each misstep taught him how sound moved, how vibrations interacted with wires, and how human speech could be transformed into electrical signals. In his Boston workshop, Bell began to refine his ideas about the transmission of sound. He studied vibration, resonance, and frequency with meticulous attention, often working through the night. Wires ran across the floor, coils sparked with energy, and the faint hum of his machines echoed in the quiet hours. This relentless pursuit was not born of ambition alone. It was driven by empathy, by the memory of his mother's deafness, and by the desire to give the world something it did not yet know it needed. And yet, even in this intense focus, Bell remained grounded. He continued teaching, nurturing students, and advocating for the deaf. The duality of his life, teacher and inventor, caretaker and dreamer, created a tension that both exhausted and inspired him. Every lesson with his students reminded him why he was pursuing the impossible. Every night in his workshop reminded him that the impossible might soon become reality. By the mid-1870s, Bell's persistence was nearing a climax. The experiments that once seemed hopeless were starting to yield results. His understanding of electricity, sound, and human speech was converging. The breakthrough was close, closer than anyone, including Bell, could yet imagine. And when it came, it would change the world forever. In Boston, a young man from Scotland was teaching the deaf, experimenting with wires, and chasing a dream the world refused to believe. Alexander Graham Bell was no longer just a boy fascinated by sound. He was on the verge of giving the world its first voice across the wires. By the mid-1870s, Alexander Graham Bell had spent years in relentless pursuit of a dream that the world called impossible.
Night after night, his small workshop in Boston hummed with electricity and hope. Wires tangled across the floor, magnets sparking with every experiment.
He was no longer just a teacher, no longer just a boy fascinated by sound. He was a man on the edge of changing communication forever. The journey to the telephone was neither quick nor easy. Each experiment seemed to push him further from success. Bells buzzed without transmitting speech. Wires vibrated without clarity. Frustration mounted, and with it, financial strain. Investors were cautious, competitors impatient, and critics relentless. Yet Bell persisted, driven by something deeper than ambition: empathy, purpose, and the memory of a mother who could never hear him speak. He knew that the human voice was not just sound, it was connection, emotion, and life itself. In the spring of 1876, after years of trial and error, Bell finally reached a point of convergence. He had been experimenting with a device that used a diaphragm and electromagnetic coil to transmit vocal vibrations. The idea was simple in theory, but devilishly complex in execution. Convert sound waves into electrical impulses, send them along a wire, and then reconvert them back into sound.
Every failed attempt taught him more about the delicate relationship between electricity and voice. Every misstep brought him closer to the moment history would remember. On March 10, 1876, that moment arrived. Bell's assistant, Thomas Watson, was in another room, tinkering with parts and wires. Bell, holding his experimental transmitter, spoke into it the words that would forever echo through time. "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." For a moment there was silence. Then through the wire, Watson's voice responded. Shock, disbelief, and awe flooded the small Boston workshop. They had done it. The human voice had traveled electrically. Distance had been conquered in an instant. What had once seemed impossible, the transmission of speech, was now real, tangible, and undeniable. But the invention of the telephone was just the beginning. Bell and Watson faced skepticism, legal battles, and the challenge of convincing the world of their creation's importance. Telegraph companies, the backbone of 19th century communication, initially dismissed the telephone as a novelty. Scientists debated its viability, investors worried about its practicality. And yet, Bell's perseverance, patience, and vision ensured the telephone would not be ignored. The implications of this single invention were staggering. Suddenly, people could communicate over long distances as if they were in the same room. Messages that once took days to deliver could now travel instantly. The telephone would eventually connect cities, countries, and continents, shrinking the world in ways no one could have imagined. Bell, however, remained humble. He understood that the invention was not an end in itself, but a tool, a bridge between people. His obsession with communication was not fueled by wealth or fame. It was fueled by empathy. The same desire that drove him to teach the deaf, to understand sound, and to solve the mysteries of speech had now produced a device that could touch the lives of millions. Even after the first successful transmission, Bell continued to refine his invention. He experimented with improving clarity, extending range, and making the device accessible to more people. Each improvement reflected his relentless curiosity and his belief that technology should serve humanity, not dominate it. Alexander Graham Bell's breakthrough was more than an invention. It was the first spark of a revolution that would reshape human interaction. From a boy listening to the vibrations under his mother's fingers to a man transmitting speech across wires, Bell had turned empathy and determination into a gift for the world. By the time Alexander Graham Bell had invented the telephone, the world had begun to notice. Yet for Bell, the invention was never about fame or fortune. It was about connection, about bridging distances, and about giving a voice to those who had none. And as history would show, this was only the beginning of a lifetime devoted to innovation, empathy, and service. After the first successful transmission, Bell's life became a whirlwind of invention, recognition, and opportunity. The telephone captured the imagination of the public, and investors finally understood the immense potential of his creation. Bell, however, remained focused not on profit but on refinement. He tirelessly improved the device, working to make communication clearer, more reliable, and accessible to more people. Each improvement reflected his fundamental belief: technology should serve humanity. But Bell's mind did not rest on the laurels of a single invention. Even as the telephone spread across continents, he pursued other innovations. He experimented with metal detectors, searching for ways to detect hidden objects beneath the earth. He explored early aviation, envisioning machines that could carry humans into the sky long before the Wright brothers' first flight. He studied medical devices, investigating how technology could improve lives and save them. Every project, whether successful or not, was guided by the same curiosity that had driven a young boy to understand sound in his mother's silent world. Above all, Bell never abandoned his work with the deaf. He founded schools and training programs, shared his methods widely, and dedicated countless hours to teaching. For him, giving a voice to the voiceless was not merely professional duty, it was personal.
It was an extension of the empathy he had learned from his mother, who had silently shaped his earliest understanding of the human heart and mind. Bell's inventions, including the telephone, were simply extensions of that mission. Tools to connect people, tools to bring understanding where there had been silence. Bell's contributions went beyond technology. He influenced education, social change, and the belief that innovation could be humanistic rather than purely mechanical. The telephone, while revolutionary, was only the most visible example of a life devoted to solving problems that mattered. He showed the world that genius was not only about brilliance in the laboratory, but also about compassion, persistence, and the courage to chase impossible dreams. As recognition grew, Bell received numerous awards and honors. He became a public figure, a symbol of scientific possibility. Yet he remained humble, often retreating from the spotlight to focus on his work, on teaching, and on exploring the unknown. Fame never distracted him. Empathy and curiosity guided him. He was a man who had learned early in life that true impact came from helping others, not from accolades. Bell lived to see his invention transform society. Telephones spread across homes, offices, and cities. The world became smaller, people became closer, communication became instantaneous. Yet behind the technology was a man who had understood that connection was more than wires and electricity. It was humanity, compassion, and understanding. Alexander Graham Bell did not just invent the telephone. He invented communication itself in its truest sense. He taught the world that sound could carry emotion, that technology could carry empathy, and that a life dedicated to understanding others could change the course of history. From a boy in Edinburgh listening to the vibrations under his mother's fingers, to a man whose invention shrank the world, Bell's legacy endures as a testament to curiosity, perseverance, and the power of one life lived beyond the struggles. Bell passed away in 1922 at the age of 75, leaving behind not just devices, patents, or discoveries, but a philosophy, innovation rooted in empathy and a belief that every struggle can be transformed into something meaningful. His story remains a reminder that greatness often emerges not from ease, but from challenge, silence, and the relentless pursuit of a vision that others cannot yet see.